earthquake, car or plane crashes, building collapse, and even armed robbery, each bringing assets and revenue loss, human mortality, and in 90% of survivors, great loss of hope. Flooding is the most common of all environment hazards, and it regularly claims over 20,000 lives per year and adversely affects about 75 million people worldwide. Nigeria has had its fair share.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows? Only time. And who can say if your love grows as your heart shows? Only time.
Emergencies, as the name implies, are not set out to happen, but they can be planned or budgeted for. Disaster management may not avert emergency threats, but it will decrease the impact of disaster where well handled. It then brings to the fore the key phases to management of disaster: mitigation, response, recovery, preparedness, and prevention. Every citizen must be well acquainted with all of them. Wishing disaster away does not avert it. Rather, as put in the local parlance, a man of valor is only identified at a time of emergency. Let us always be prepared.
You can follow us on all our social media platforms: Facebook at NTA Network News, Instagram at NTA Network, Twitter at NTA News Now, YouTube at NTA News Online. Or visit www.nta.ng. For live streaming, visit www.nta.ng/live. Now, you can stay updated on the go, be it on your TV, iPhone, laptop, or iPad, or download the NTA mobile application from your Play Store or App Store. NTA, you can beat the rich.
I am Elizabeth Abad. I am here to talk about facts. There is so much misinformation and distortion out there, especially on the social media. All it takes is just a click and the fake news goes viral. However, here in NTA, we deal with facts.
My job is to go out there and comb for factual news and information just the way it is, all in the interest of the nation. I'm Naja Atutijani.
Here on the NTA, we present only the facts, verified. Beware of fake news, don't be a victim. Stay tuned to the NTA.
Especially at this time of the coronavirus pandemic.
My name is Nnamdi Ojipo.
From dusk to dawn, 24 hours a day, NTA International is with you. In your living room, office, and everywhere, anywhere. We provide the company you desire in terms of balanced and up-to-date news, programs, and the best of entertainment.
No sacred cows in fight against corruption. President Buhari tells newly appointed EFCC chairman.
Northern Governors meeting ends in Kaduna. Resolves to work with security agencies for safety of schools.
Federal government says it will work towards reducing inflation to below double digits.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss 1 year of COVID-19 in Nigeria.
It will be 1 year tomorrow since Nigeria recorded her index case of coronavirus when an Italian citizen who came into the country tested positive for the virus in Lagos.
That's right, Kirian. And about 2 weeks after that incident, the second case of the virus was reported in a Wikoro area of Ogun State. This time, it was that of a Nigerian who had contact with the index case.
And thereafter, the infections continue to spread from state to state until it covered 36 states of the country and the FCT through movement of infected persons, even though some states were in denial for quite some time before coming to terms with reality.
Well, as the virus began to spread, the federal government took steps to control its spread to various communities by constituting a presidential task force on COVID-19, which on a daily basis briefed Nigerians on developments regarding the character and ways of containment of the spread of the virus. Now, the briefings of the PTF were being beamed live on the Nigerian Television Authority.
And these measures include total lockdown of the country, banning interstate travel, both land and air, as well as international travels for months, enforcement of COVID-19 protocols, increasing capacity of states to detect the virus by the establishment of more laboratories to test, and above all, training of personnel to handle management of the virus. Kingsley, despite the denial by some states at the initial stage of the infection, we had witnessed the deaths of very many important personalities in those states arising from COVID-19 complications.
That's right, Kirian. Now, talking about senior government officials, reputable academics, and other high-profile personalities who passed on. And now you can also recall the scores of deaths that arose from the so-called strange illnesses in some states during the peak of the coronavirus infection in the country, particularly Kano, if you recall, Kirian. Yes.
Exactly. And I think part of this is Kebi also.
Jigawa,
rather.
That's right.
Now, worthy of mention is the number of frontline workers for the COVID-19, which include medical doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals, newsmen, and security agents. A number of medical doctors died in the course of managing COVID-19.
No question about that. May their souls continue to rest in peace. Now, as of today, as the country is already under the second wave of the virus, Nigeria has recorded over 154,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 with nearly 2,000 fatalities.
So, where is Nigeria in terms of the management of COVID-19? What progress has been recorded in the area of capacity building and the knowledge about the variants of COVID-19? What is the state of the search for COVID-19 vaccines? How have Nigerians supported the fight against the virus? And what are the challenges encountered in the war against the virus? What do we need to do to contain the virus going forward? These are some of the issues we intend to address as we discuss 1 year of COVID-19 in Nigeria on Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kirian Umayo. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian to also welcome you to the program, reaching you live, as always, on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, we're going to have complimentary segments, and these include newspaper review, business, and others. Right now, we'll join Dennis Adegunloye for the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Kingsley, and good morning, Kirian. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari Thursday held a strategic meeting with the newly appointed EFCC chairman, Abdulrasheed Bawa. This is the first meeting between the duo since Wednesday's confirmation of the EFCC chairman by the Senate. Although held behind closed doors, NTA News gathered that the meeting was an opportunity for the new EFCC boss to assure the president of his commitment to the task ahead. The president also assured Bawa of his support in the discharge of his duties. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, says with Nigeria's exit from recession, the major target of the federal government now is to bring down the rate of inflation to below double digits. Giving further details on the current state of the nation's economy, the minister said pushing the GDP growth far beyond the population growth is also a priority so that the impact of the genuine efforts by the government can be adequately felt by Nigerians.
The National Assembly was very, very critical in this process because without wasting any time, they were quickly able to pass an amendment to the MTEF and amendment to the budget. They were able to sit with us and review the economic sustainability plan and gave us the flexibility that we needed, including accommodations to incur deficits that was higher than the deficit that is defined in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Every country needed to do that. And in an exceptional circumstance, the Fiscal Responsibility Act allows us to borrow more than the 3% to GDP threshold to be able to manage a national emergency.
The industrial action embarked upon by members of the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, SANU, and the Non-Academic Staff Union of Universities, NASU, has been called off with effect from today, 26 February 2021. Secretary of NASU and spokesperson of the Joint Action Committee of the two unions, Peter Adeyemi, disclosed this after a closed-door meeting between the committee and representatives of the federal government.
Those areas that needed to be harmonized have been harmonized to the satisfaction of both parties. And resulting from that development, we have agreed that this ongoing national strike in the universities and inter-university centers should be suspended.
With the normalcy restored in that university system, we intend to do the visitation panel, which is one of the agreements we reached with them, and which cannot be carried out without normalcy in the university system.
Governors of the 19 northern states have concluded their meeting in Kaduna with a resolve to work in synergy with security agencies for the safety of all schools within the region. Muhammad Umar Ajingi reports that the forum also agreed to look into humanitarian challenges in IDP camps, stop intra- and inter-border porosity, to check movements of criminal elements, and invest in rural areas to curb farmers-herders clashes. The forum, after receiving reports of the various committees, resolved to look into them for possible implementation, urging that state governors to strengthen partnership with their colleagues in other parts of the country to entrench unity, tolerance, and harmonious coexistence among Nigerians. Senate President Ahmed Lawan has informed the international community that Nigeria's war against insecurity will soon be won once and for all. Speaking with when he granted audience to the British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Katrina Lang, the Senate President explained that the change of service chiefs is one of the renewed measures by the federal government to address insecurity. Addressing some of the concerns raised by the High Commissioner, Senator Lawan stressed that the 9th National Assembly is leaving no stone unturned in ensuring the quick passage of critical bills, including the Electoral Amendment Act Bill and the Petroleum Industry Bill.
Service chiefs are very positive, but into your overall assessment on the North East.
The change of service chiefs by Mr. President itself was significant and instructive, because to bring in a fresh set of people to head the services tells that story that we want to see an improvement in the way and manner we fight insurgency in Nigeria.
And the House of Representatives has urged the Independent National Electoral Commission to restore 8 state constituencies in Oyo State in line with the judgment of a federal high court. In a motion raised by Chairman House Committee on Information, Segun Odebumi, the lawmakers noted that the restoration would ensure the people of the affected areas in Oyo State exercise their right to representation.
From the day of judgment to date, no equal or superior court has set aside the court decision, which under reference.
The court judgment was passed in March of 2013. Now, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, confirms 634 new cases of COVID-19 in 21 states and the FCT. The breakdown, according to states, indicates that Lagos still leads with 259 new infections, followed by Osun with 45, then Edo State with 38, Ogun records 35 new cases, the FCT 33, Anambra 26, while Imo and Ondo have 24 new cases each. Other states with new cases include Akwa Ibom and Plateau with 20 new infections each, Abia and Kaduna 19, Ebonyi 17, Borno and Rivers 10, Kano 9, Delta 8, Kebbi 7, Nasarawa 4, Oyo 3, while Enugu and Ekiti record 2 new cases each. Nigeria now has 154,476 confirmed cases of COVID-19, out of which 131,699 have been treated and discharged, as the death toll now stands at 1,891. Well, that concludes the morning news on Good Morning Nigeria. The program will continue shortly after this break with Kingsley and Kieran. Good morning.
I bring you wonderful news. The village headmaster is coming back to your screen. Mo wiri abi mi o wiri. Teacher yo mo, a fẹ́ lọ wá nǹkan jẹ. Teacher yo mo, a fẹ́ lọ wá nǹkan jẹ. Ọmọ onírẹsì ti dé.
Go na better school for last gidi. Not be all this on a rugged yes school for Ijabi. I don't know for you.
It's called Oja Village. Kadesi, we know happy at all.
And I know that even you too, you are getting a lot of orders. Hey, we are trying, shao. Sweep her leg out. She was standing there. Sweep it.
I love you so much.
And how did I give you the impression that I was interested in that position?
50-year anniversary.
You mean anniversary?
I talk with that now.
Not for me. Not for me because of Pamio.
Smartphone Network.
Sensitivity is a short, sharp pain that people experience when they have something hot or cold getting to the nerve of the tooth. Dentists recommend Sensodyne. It's able to calm the nerve of the tooth. It works.
New Sensodyne Extra Whitening Toothpaste. Extra whitening action for sensitive teeth.
For over 70 years, we've practiced healthy hygiene habits together. The world needs us to keep our fight going against germs. So let's wash our hands for 20 seconds regularly. Dettol. Protect what's worth fighting for.
When times are tough, we know that as a mother, one thing you should never compromise on is your family's oral health, because they deserve the best. Oral-B, all-round protection. Its great value, it protects your mouth from harmful bacteria and also protects you against tooth holes and gum problems which can lead to tooth loss. It strengthens your family's teeth and gives them all-round protection. So remember, protect their future. Oral-B for healthier, stronger teeth in just 1 week.
West Brom continue their fight to survive relegation when they welcome Brighton to the Hawthorns. This Saturday, it's West Bromwich Albion versus Brighton and Hove on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Axis Bank, Babai Jebu, Lipton, and Close Up in association with Gold.com.
Well, thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria for this Friday. Now, let's talk business. The federal government keys into public-private partnership towards achieving its renewable energy goals for the country. Let's now join Chimobi Water Energy for more on business news.
Achieving the Vision 2030 in renewable energy for Nigeria, which targets the generation of grid-connected electricity of over 30,000 megawatts, 30% of which is expected to come from renewable energy to solve the power problem of Nigeria, has led to a stakeholders dialogue between government and other key players in the industry. The dialogue, organized by the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Association, was geared towards improving the provision of power for the country through clean energy generation.
Renewable energy offers the promise of confined continued energy supply without comparable harm, and offers promise of supply existing and expanding demand in a clean and sustainable manner. I respectfully at this juncture acknowledge and identify myself as an alliance with the commendable initiatives of the Nigerian government in deploying renewable energy technologies by creating more access to electricity for many communities and households in Nigeria.
And now to the capital market, where investors lose 65.83 billion naira as NSE All-Share Index dips by 0.31% amid renewed sell pressure, closing at 40,095.49 basis points as against 0.14% appreciation recorded previously. Its year-to-date returns currently stands at minus 0.44%. However, market capitalization has dropped to 20.97 trillion naira as at close of transactions Thursday. Market turnover closed negative as volume moved down by 30.56% as against 38.94% uptick recorded in previous session. Transcorp, Dangote Sugar and UBA were the most active to boost market turnover. Meanwhile, Zenith Bank, Dangote Sugar topped market value list. With business news, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji.
Many thanks, Chimobi Walter Naji, for the business packet. Coming up next now is Newspaper Review.
And let's welcome Bayo Atebe, our reviewer, who is already here seated. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Kirian. Thank you. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good to see you.
Thank you. We may have to start with Daily Trust, Kinsley. Daily Trust newspaper. Reactions as Naba, Utomi, others draft new constitution for Nigeria. The story is on page 32. Then federal government plans supplementary budget as COVID-19 vaccines arrive next week. The story is also on page 33. Tears as NAV plane crash victims buried. It's also on page 33. In rare access to enclave, bandits speak on ravaging insecurity. Bandits speak on ravaging insecurity. And of course, the photo story there clearly shows the bandits and their hideouts. So, leader Shehu Rakib and the Kachala Halilu and some other fighters. Buhari vows to deal with criminals, warns against ethnic profiling. We are helpless, parents of Kagara boys. Gunmen killed 4 policemen in Calabar, it's on page 30. Nigeria's economy on course, UN Deputy Secretary General says, it's on page 18. Then Benue releases 210 impounded cows to owners. The story is on page 30. Kinsley.
Okay, let's also take a look at the Punch newspaper from above the name flag. Reps threaten arrest of pension administrators for shunning probe. 5G deployment may undermine Nigeria's security, says ONSA, that's Office of the National Security Advisor. $10.7 trillion spent on fuel subsidy in 10 years. That's according to Moman. Moman is the Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria. Vaccine. Federal government plans supplementary budget, says $31 billion loan not high. Details on page 25. And you can see the COVID-19 update there as an earpiece to the nameplate. Confirmed cases in Nigeria over 154,000. 131,000 have been discharged, and unfortunately you have nearly 1,900 who have passed away. Around the world, 2.5 million persons at least have died from the over 113 million cases. This story comes with a kicker, and it says differential wage bill. Oyo, Delta, Gombe, and others back National Assembly as Labour fumes. 4 riders. It reflects true federalism. States should pay according to IGR. That's Makinde's aide. Makinde is governor for your state. It's unfair to expect Gombe to pay same wage as Lagos, Commissioner insists. Bill dead on arrival, says Delta NLC. It's against workers' interests, Kano NLC chair. And unfortunately, you see the photographs there on the front page of the paper. That service chiefs, fire me present as 7 Nigerian Air Force jet crash victims buried. Their souls rest in peace. After signing agreement with federal government, varsity workers on strike. Again, Boko Haram abducts travelers on Maiduguri-Damaturu Highway. Autom and Mohammed are brother governors. Should end verbal war. Autom is Benue governor, Mohammed Bauchi governor, and Diri, who is speaking, is governor of Bayelsa. Details on page 11. Agencies disobeyed Oshibajo on 24-hour port operations. That's according to Usman. NPA shifting. Angry, diseased relatives attack policeman at panel. PPP confirms contract scam in Proda, and reps threatening DG. Ayo.
Thank you, Kinsley. Let's start on a somber mode as we pay our respect to 7 officers of the Nigerian Air Force who died last week during the crash and have been buried and accorded national honors at the National Cemetery. Family members joined the Minister of Defense, Chief of Defense Staff, and Service Chiefs to pay their last respect and honor our heroes. An emotional Chief of Staff said, the deceased officers are among the finest officers in the service, adding that the Nigerian Air Force is still palpably shocked and grieving. These heroes in the service had so much confidence, and he prayed God to grant the immediate families the fortitude to bear the loss. He saluted the supreme sacrifice in defense of peace. One of the deceased officers was said to have been on leave, but he was recalled for the operation. He left behind 3 children, among whom is 1-year-old son and an aged mother. They were accorded full military honors. May their patriotic soul rest in peace. President Muhammadu Buhari says government will continue to deal with the insurgency, banditry, and kidnapping and other criminals threatening innocent Nigerians. The Chief of Staff to the President, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, who represented the President at the meeting of Northern governors and emirs and chiefs in Kaduna, warned against ethnic profiling of criminals. He declared, criminals are criminals and must be dealt with accordingly without resorting to ethnic profiling. The President says he has tasked the new service chiefs to devise strategies to end the ugly situation where lives of Nigerians are continually threatened by hoodlums and criminals. While commending the gathering for all their initiatives in de-escalating tension arising from crashes, he called for synergy with other forums in other regions for the collective good of the nation. The Northern Governors Forum was led by the Chairman Governor Lalon of Plateau, while the Emir's chief was led by the Sultan. The Director General of the Department of State, the Inspector General of Police, and a representative of the National Assembly, as well as the Minister of Information, were at the meeting. While Kagara abductors are still being held, students of Government Science Secondary School Kagara and staff and family members remain abducted because the condition of swap proposed by the abductors has not been met. Daily Trust reports that abductors had demanded for the release of 6 members of their group arrested by security agents. Of the 6, 4 are said to be identified. 2 are located in Katsina, and 1 each in Kaduna and Niger State. Identifying the 2 remaining members is probably one of the cause delaying conclusions of the process. Declaring a delegation of the Governors Forum went to Mina, and they visited former generals, President Ibrahim Babangida and Abdulsalami Abubakar, and they all called on the federal and state government to consider all means of safe securing the release of the children. Meanwhile, the non-teaching unions of the Nigerian universities, SANU and NASU, have suspended their 3-week-old strike. Representatives of the union say that after a meeting with the federal government delegation, they have got their justice in sharing the 40 billion earned allowances and non-payment of minimum wage, which was among the issues they called for. The Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, says that rough edges of the negotiations have been smoothened. Normal activities should now return to the university. He emphasized categorically that one of their demands, that is visitation panels, cannot begin to work unless they carry out normal activities in the university. The Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations says that Nigeria's economy is moving in the right economic direction. She says that there are challenges in Nigeria. Some of the challenges include the population, which is very large, is diversity in ethnicity, religious backgrounds, and opportunity. But however, she emphasized these are all opportunities, and for which Nigeria should derive strengths and not weaknesses. He was speaking also about his trips around the country. She said she has seen a country that is growing. It is not fast enough, but is moving in the right economic direction. He says challenges remain with security, social cohesion, as well as social contrast between government and the people. I know the issues are being worked upon. She said the United Nations recognizes the initiatives of Nigeria and other global partners, especially in sustainable development goals. She was guest at the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Look at this story on Daily Trust, the issue of bandits now speaking on ravaging insecurity. My thinking is that the bandits begin to speak. I don't know. This reporter actually is an undercover reporter, and if you go to details of the story, it does appear that they're becoming bolder every day. I mean, to make some comments, concerning security in Nigeria, which they are, of course, the the people who are who are causing this insecurity we're talking about. And we're talking about rescuing the Kagara boys. And if you look at the photograph here, you find that they are at home, wherever they're camping. And this is a part of those that are in Zamfara. And they have all their connections, between Zamfara, Kaduna, Kebbi, and what have you.
Yes. Niger, Kaduna, Zamfara, Kebbi axis. There's a forest that spread across those states, and they are moving across. Some of the persons that were abducted will tell you that they were forced to walk across from Niger State there, through Kaduna State, up to as far as Zamfara State, all throughout the night. But the dilemma here is that the media has a role of surveillance of the environment, giving information. But there's also the concern that sometimes the media becomes the oxygen for which criminals tend to breathe and survive. If you recall, Margaret Thatcher once said, in fact, he stopped media from giving publicity to Northern Ireland because he said media publicity was the oxygen that gave life to criminality. So that is the dilemma of the media. Most people will turn around and blame the media that media is giving them publicity. And they survive by the publicity they are given, and they are encouraged and emboldened by their activities. However, unless the media covers and tell us what is happening and they are thinking, we will not be able to think of solutions. So that is the dilemma.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering, a couple of years ago, the English Oxford Dictionary came up with an update of the dictionary, and some words obviously used more frequently in Nigeria as part of Nigerian English found their way into the dictionary. For instance, K-leg. I'm sure you recall we discussed it on this program. I'm just curious. I just hope that we do not, sometime in the future, find an entry in the dictionary redefining bandit. To say, for instance, Nigerian English, that would be bandits. Heavily armed, non-criminal elements who nevertheless have the right to roam the forests, kidnap persons for ransom, and engage in all kinds of atrocities without being brought to justice.
Yes. A bandit is a criminal, a robber, who waylays travelers on the highway and hold them to ransom. That is exactly what we are saying. But unfortunately, criminality in Nigeria sometimes have definitions. They will start by arguing that they are fighting for a cause, and they will use criminal means to attain that cause.
And in this case, of course, what has played out in the past now is that we're beginning to negotiate with them. I mean, if they kidnap some persons, you negotiate with them.
The president was very firm yesterday when he said that, look, these are criminal elements. And what does that tell you? So, all right, Kirian, we have an editorial to take if we have enough time for that.
Maybe 1 minute for that. Deserved rewards. Let's bring it by. The conduct of 2 Nigerian students give hope that in Nigeria, all is not lost. There are still good young Nigerians we find in universities. Bio.
2 Nigerian students have been honored. One is Ebizi Eradiri, who was a student of Delta State University. She made first class, and she said the path to her first class was dressing modestly and making sure that she was not attractive to anybody. And when a lecturer made serious overtures, she reported him to a head of department who called that lecturer to the other. She made her first class, and Delta State government has, Bayelsa State government has awarded a scholarship for postgraduate up to a PhD level. The second one is Ami Ugochukwu. He found a missing telephone belonging to an officer and returned it. The officer reported it to the vice chancellor, and the vice chancellor has given the chap scholarship throughout her studies. And the editorial is emphasizing that good character, peace, honesty is the best policy.
Absolutely, absolutely, Bayo. On that note, we'd like to thank you very much for being around all through the week, and therefore wishing you a lovely weekend.
Thank you very much.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria on NTA's network service. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with coronavirus in Nigeria 1 year later.
Saying thank you to all loyal customers in the Airtel Thanks Cash Token Rewards. Each subscriber stands a chance to win up to 100 million naira every week. To opt in, dial *479# and follow the prompts. To qualify, simply recharge your Airtel number. Each cash token gets you an 8 Naira instant cash back, plus a chance to win up to 100 million Naira weekly in the National Cash Token Draw, showing every Saturday by 9:30 p.m. on AIT and 8 p.m. on Pop Central DSTV channel 189. All transactions done on *479# are rewarded with more cash tokens, and you can also check your cash token balance via the same code. Only loyal customers of the smartphone network are entitled to the Airtel Cash Token Reward. For more information, simply dial *479# or visit www.airtelthanks.ng. Terms and conditions apply.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
For over 70 years, we've practiced healthy hygiene habits together. The world needs us to keep our fight going against germs. So let's wash our hands for 20 seconds regularly. Dettol. Protect what's worth fighting for.
Get your limited edition packs now before the final whistle blows.
The broadcast media ecosystem is dynamic and requires continuous training for practitioners to perform optimally. NTA TV College Jos invites relevant officers to the following specially packaged training programs. Intermediate online news reporting skills, date 1st March to 12th March 2021, 2 weeks. Studio lighting indoor and outdoor, date 1st March to 5th March 2021, 1 week. Modern trends in broadcast media marketing, date 15th March to 9th April 2021, 4 weeks. Understanding public service rules and mastering the art of standard minute writing, reports, memoranda, and briefs, date 15th February to 12th March 2021, 4 weeks. The course fee for the 4-week courses is 100,000 Naira per participant. The fee for the 2-week course is 80,000 Naira, while the course fee for the 1-week course is 40,000 Naira only. Accommodation inclusive. Venue for all the courses is the serene and secure environment of NTA TV College near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos. For more inquiries, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College, Jos, training you to be the best you want to be.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
The second wave of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic is upon us.
To safeguard lives of our people, government has signed the Health Protection Regulations, which makes wearing a face mask mandatory in public places.
Wear a mask. Keep social and physical distancing. Avoid crowded places. Wash your hands regularly with soap and clean water. And use hand sanitizer.
COVID-19 is real. Do not be infected. Do not spread it. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
West Brom continue their fight to survive relegation when they welcome Brighton to the Hawthorns. This Saturday, it's West Bromwich Albion versus Brighton and Hove on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Axis Bank, Babai Jebu, Lipton, and Close Up in association with Gold.com.
And you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of NTA. By tomorrow, it will be 1 year when the index case of COVID-19 was discovered in Nigeria. And now let's take this background report put together by Victor Azu on the journey so far in the fight against COVID-19.
February 27, 2020, just like yesterday, when an Italian returnee into the country was confirmed COVID-19 positive, Nigeria's index case. That one case soon multiplied through direct and indirect contacts, while new independent cases also emerged. As the numbers increased, so did the challenges. The federal government responded by setting up the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, which advised it on the pandemic. At the peak of infections in the country, the federal government declared total lockdown, which lasted about 4 months with its adverse effects on the economy. 1 year on, Nigeria has had more than 150,000 infections, leading to nearly 2,000 deaths, with a second wave of infections still around the corner. On the positive side, COVID-19 vaccines have been produced around the world, and the National Food and Drug Administration and Control (NAFDAC) has approved 2 for use in the country, with the first batch expected soon. How well has Nigeria managed the novel coronavirus pandemic? What lessons have been learned? What needs to be done to make similar situations in the future less severe? These are some of the issues to dwell on Good Morning Nigeria.
Many thanks, Victor Axel, for that backgrounder. We have guests with us this morning to discuss the issue, and they've all at various times been our guests as we battled with the coronavirus 1 year on. First, let's welcome the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Osagie Ihanire. Honorable Minister, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Also here with us in the studios, Professor Abdusalami Nasidi, who is the former Director General of NCDC, that's the Center for Disease Control, and also Provost of the College of Health Sciences, University of Africa in Bayelsa State. He was also Vice Chair of the Committee of Medical Experts for the FCT Task Force on COVID-19. Professor Nasidi, delighted to have you this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we also like to introduce Professor Maurice Iwu. Professor Maurice Iwu is the Chairman, Imo State Task Force on COVID-19. Professor Iwu is joining us via Zoom from Owerri. Good morning and welcome to the program, sir.
Good morning.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin first by asking the Honorable Minister of Health. 1 year since the coronavirus outbreak in Nigeria as part of the global pandemic. What has been our national experience?
Well, the experience has been very interesting. The COVID-19 is peculiar in that it is novel. Nobody knew anything about it at the time of its outbreak. So as we are responding, we were learning along. You see the contrast between the present outbreak of Ebola in Congo and Guinea. The response is much faster now because they know more about it. At the beginning, when it first broke out, some 2014, the response was not as rapid as it is now. So we have learned a lot as we have gone along, and we have also been able to strengthen our assets. We have increased our laboratory capacity from 2 to about 80. We have trained a lot more people. We have acquired a lot more very relevant assets. We have more infection control and prevention measures, and there we have been able to increase our bed spaces. So there's a lot that we have learned there.
All right, sir. Now, what aspect of the fight, has been more tasking to your ministry and, of course, health workers in Nigeria?
The most tasking thing I would say has been the tracing and tracking. If you have a person who is infected, the protocol is that you trace all the contacts. And tracing and tracking is difficult, it is tedious. In some cases, it is risky because you go to areas where you meet hostility or areas where people are in denial, especially if they did not have any symptoms at all. So that area has been particularly tasking. And then also difficult was the beginning when we didn't have enough resources in materials to respond, PPE, reagents. So we're very lucky that the government stood by, provided resources, and our partners were also at our side. The UN system provided us with a lot of PPEs, personal protective equipment, and all the wherewithal that we require to respond. West African Health Organization helped.
The government of China helped too. European countries helped. And even the private sources like Jack Ma, if you remember very well, provided us with many of the things we needed at the beginning, and a lot of the learnings that the WHO also gave us, sharing experience. They had weekly meetings with us and with the rest of the world. So it's been a very constructive journey throughout the outbreak.
Well, in at least 100 years, the world had not witnessed what has played out in the past year with respect to coronavirus. It's been a total new ball game, as it were, as you have also explained. Just tell us, by way of synopsis, what your personal experience has been as Honorable Minister of Health, faced with this global challenge, but also with a peculiar Nigerian character, as it were. What was it like being a Minister of Health under the pandemic?
Well, it has been very challenging, first of all, driven by the fear of the casualties that came with it in other countries. We saw the health systems of very strong and powerful countries on their knees in Europe, in the United States. Saw the number of deaths they had, saw the number of infections they were having, how their health systems were also reeling under the weight of the COVID-19 pandemic. At the beginning, it was believed that we needed more and more ventilators, and we asked the question, do you have enough ventilators? And we worked very hard to try and acquire ventilators. Then it turned out that no, ventilators are not really the problem. You require high flow supplementary oxygen. So we are now building a lot of oxygen plants. And then what has helped in a way was that we had the opportunity to study what other countries were doing. The US, the UK, Italy, Spain, they had very, very serious impacts, and we were able to watch on TV, sometimes live, how they responded and what we thought were the learnings we could learn, and some of the things we knew we had to avoid. So that was useful, and the collaboration with the World Health Organization and other bilaterals. We had conferences with various countries. We spoke with Indians and with Chinese and with Americans on their own experience, a lot of experience sharing. So the journey has been one of like driving into very unknown territory and finding your way through to your destination, and very unknown terrain. That's what it has been like. But on the whole, we have not done too badly. Our health system was never really on its knees. We were able to make it through and not have as many casualties as other countries have had.
Yeah, and I was just going to come into the aspect of having casualties, because initially it was thought that Africa is going to experience corpses on the streets because of the experience of Western world, that was badly hit, by the virus. There was no treatment protocol as at that time. Now, how did Nigeria come about the treatment protocol that has made it possible for us to have many casualties?
Well, we didn't have that many casualties compared to Europe. For one thing, Nigeria was very quick off the block. We were among the first countries in the world to start really screening at the airport, while other countries were letting everybody in. We started the thermal screening very, very early at the very beginning. Started with sanitation, started with taking travel history, started very early with tracing, contact tracing, and going after all persons who had been affected. When the index came in, the Italian gentleman who came in here was diagnosed, we were able to very quickly isolate all those who had been in contact with, traced 69 persons, and just one other person had been infected by him. And at that point, that particular case was closed. And so the further transmission from that index case didn't go beyond that point. But subsequent imports were to come in. As you know, the COVID-19 is an imported disease, and the importation continued on all sides until the portal systems, which were on very strict alert, eventually could not hold back all the infections that came in, mostly by air. In fact, we were very quick to have also got the first case that came by land border. Was a gentleman who was touring West Africa on a motorcycle. We were able to track him also. And so that was one advantage. The other advantage that has been mentioned, it has been said, is the youth bulge that we have. As you know, a lot of young people will have symptoms but will not be ill. And perhaps that's the reason why the casualty rate was also so old. You realize that in Europe, most of the casualties were elderly people in nursing homes. And there was, at that time, not enough understanding of the disease to keep old people away safe, as they have now learned to do. So that was perhaps another reason why in Europe we had such high casualties, and the attention to the people who were ill. It was a learning process all along the way, and we were in many ways very responsive in learning from the mistakes of others and adapting the lessons into our own circumstances.
All right, Honorable Minister Dr. Sagi Anire, thank you very much. We'll, of course, come back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's bring in now Professor Abdulsalami Nasidi. Professor Nasidi, 1 year on, Nigeria's been battling with coronavirus. Tell us what you think the experience has been.
Well, we, as the Honorable Minister had mentioned, we thank God that it didn't meet us, how will I say, unprepared as it could have happened, especially when the Ebola, crossed our borders. We were lucky that Nigeria was ahead, in fighting similar diseases, and had established the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, an agency that was put in place specifically for, handling this type of cases. So the center was actually running strong, and by the time the infection entered Nigeria, we were already in a position to have the capacity, not just to track the infected persons, but even track the virus. And the country had the NCDC reference lab. We had very strong DNA labs in the country already. And within 11 days of coming in, identifying the virus that the Italian brought into Nigeria, Nigerian scientists had virtually characterized the gene of the virus and even deposited it in the World Gene Bank. That is a big feat that had never been seen in Africa. The world was shocked, so we could respond so quickly. So the existence of the NCDC, some other strong laboratories like the one in Ede, the African Center for Genomics, and some in Kano and Ibadan, coming together into the Nigerian Institute of Medical Research, empowered Nigeria to be able to, jump and try to be ahead of the virus. So if you don't identify the enemy, assess the strength of the enemy, and know the behavior of the enemy, you can never win a war. So since we were able to quickly identify the enemy and read the characteristics, we're a little bit more prepared. Then, of course, our experience in fighting Ebola and polio, empowered Nigeria to also put in place some mechanisms which were being strengthened by the time the infection came. So we now started repurposing all those mechanisms and use them to fight this new infection. And that had been, really impressive.
All right, thank you, sir. And let's go to Professor Maurice Iwu, who is the chairman of Imo State Task Force on COVID-19. So let's get your take on the fight against coronavirus 1 year on.
Yeah, first of all, I think I want to congratulate the Honorable Minister and his colleagues and the NCDC that Nigeria did a marvelous job. The early start, as Nasidi mentioned, helped us a lot. I think we borrowed from what was learned during the Ebola crisis. And this whole idea of early start and being able to move from bench to the bedside also helped us. Our doctors have shown such a readiness to challenge the virus that, as is just mentioned now, it was just like a war situation. Here in Imo State, we learned from the early shock. Remember, the government here had just started, and 1 week after they just came into office, the virus stopped. So I was left with the task of having to assemble the medical team and the support staff. Right now, what we are having is the fact that this second wave is not really so much different from the first wave, only that it is faster in spreading. We have had about 26,000 tests so far, samples we have tested. Out of that 26,000, we have about 1,400 positive cases. The fatality rate is still very low, lower than most other countries, but that doesn't mean that we are relaxing. We are still enforcing the basic fundamental from the NCDC. And I'm so glad that we have doctors who are committed. People from actually outside our state call us in here to help. So through telemedicine and actually some kind of medical tourism, the doctors here have done excellently very well, and they have been able to treat as many patients as we can. But Nigerians are still very stubborn. When you go to the rural areas, people are not wearing face masks. They are not maintaining social distancing. The funeral ceremonies are still going on. And one of the saddest things we found that during this second wave, almost all the cases of death so far had been people who got it through social mingling. We warned and we asked people not to attend such functions, particularly those who are 65 years and older. But people just didn't listen. They went out and did their thing. So we had to start using mobile courts to be able to arrest people and then actually charge them. And then we have to shut down some eating places. We have to go to churches. I'm sure small churches were not happy with us because we actually have to force some of them to have strict church rules so that they'll be able to have the basic things, have their face mask, wash their hands, have some facility for washing hands, and maintain the social distancing. But all said, I think we have a success case in our hand. That is, Nigeria as a country should be proud of what we have done. But the virus is not yet over. And that is why the leadership for the Ministry of Health is really, really very, very encouraging. The ministry showed a positive, quick outcome. And then we also be able to prevent people from coming into our country who were infected. What the port health people did was also excellent. They were intercepting people who are coming to the country and testing them. And one of the mistakes that people were making at the earliest time, that they think that if they tested negative in their countries and they enter the flight, that they will remain negative. It doesn't follow that way. Sometimes when you are even in the flight, you can contact the virus, and when you come home here, and when they are being asked to quarantine themselves, they will not even obey that. So it's a mixed bag. We have done well in terms of preparations. We have done well in terms of how promptly the NCDC have done. And also the coordination have been excellent. The NCDC have been showing leadership and being able to supply material we needed and information that we needed in the States to be able to carry out this project. And our doctors have worked as a team. I think it's really something the country should be proud of. And those who are doing the right things, I'm sure history and people who are coming after will look at this period and say, yeah, that was a way to manage a pandemic like this. Like Nasidi mentioned earlier, we learned a lot from the Ebola crisis. During the Ebola time, a lot of things, when he was in NCDC, most of these things we're enjoying now, they set it up at that time. And that is the way to go. I'm urging that we shouldn't dismantle this infrastructure that we're building, that there is no need to us to believe that this pandemic, such a pandemic will not come again. We are living in a world, in a natural world, and these things will keep coming. So the best thing to do, like we have mentioned, we gain a lot from the preparation done during polio, during Ebola, and during this time. And then if we can keep a steady state, just in case planning, I think that is important. A knee-jerk reaction is not good enough. And that's why most of our neighbors were caught unawares, because they didn't have this kind of infrastructure that we had built up at this particular time. Thank you.
Professor Morris, well, thank you very much there for your response. We'll return to you also in the course of the conversation. Now back to Dr. Osagie-Anire. Dr. Osagie-Anire, one of the obviously sad experiences in the past year has been the loss of some healthcare workers. Do we have a sense of the numbers? Some of these were, if you like, innocent victims. How much of a disincentive was that to those who were on the front line?
Yes, many countries lost healthcare workers, and it wasn't just Nigeria. It happened all over the world, in some places even more, because the ease of transmission of this disease was not very well known. And it was only with time that more emphasis was given to infection prevention and control and to preventing healthcare workers. There are places in Europe where they were also so short of materials, of PPEs and of masks, or even masks, that there were countries quarreling over masks. And because of the lack of enough protective materials, and healthcare workers were very zealous, many got infected, and some were sick, others lost their lives, and we do regret the lives lost in the course of service. In Nigeria, it was about the same thing, that a lot of very hardworking and zealous frontline healthcare workers became infected. But we have been able to strengthen infection prevention and control, do a lot of training. We have trained thousands of healthcare workers now, and also provided them with the wherewithal to protect themselves, and continuous retraining and reminding that they must look after themselves and follow the very strict protocol for looking after patients or for diagnosing patients. This goes for frontline health workers and laboratory workers, because laboratory people have to deal with identifying this virus. But by now, I think the rate has gone down very significantly, and the measures that have been put in place are beginning to work as people have understood the nature of this disease and the ease of its transmission. It's just the new virus in the UK which is causing concern now, because it seems to be 70% or so more infectious than the strain that we knew before.
Okay. All right. Professor Nasidi, you earlier spoke about Nigerian scientists, being able to characterize the virus. That means, for me and the ordinary Nigerian, understanding the biological behavior of the virus. But we also discussed on this program some time ago the possibility of Nigeria developing a local vaccine, that can, address the virus. A vaccine that could be, efficacious enough to also withstand the intensity of the virus, like we now have the ones already manufactured across the globe that we're yearning for. Is there any step taken within this 1 year to see how we can come about local vaccine, made in Nigeria vaccine for COVID-19?
Well, I just have to start by saying that in the early 40s, 50s, 60s, Nigeria had already capacity to manufacture vaccines. There was a vaccine manufacturing plant at Yaba, and that plant was, at the time I joined the Ministry of Health, already manufacturing 3 vaccines. Rabies vaccine, yellow fever vaccine, and then to some extent they manufactured measles vaccine. And I joined that laboratory. I was invited by the then Director of Public Health, Dr. E.A. Smith, who was a very famous international public health officer and director of Nigerian Public Health, who invited me after my presentation in Paris, 1985, to come and head the place. So we went to Yaba, and we met the laboratory producing just nominal doses of vaccine. The annual capacity for the vaccine, like yellow fever, was just about 100 to 150,000, and the rabies was just about 10,000. So we made a proposal and increased the capacity of that laboratory. And just as about the time we are finishing that upgrading, that's the first phase of the upgrading, yellow fever outbreak occurred in Benue, then Oyo State. In Benue, it was rural yellow fever, and then in Oyo, it's urban yellow fever, which is very devastating. It affected Ogbomoso. So you cannot believe that before the WHO could respond and other countries to come to help us, the vaccines used to start checkmating that outbreak was the one produced in Nigeria. And praise the Lord, we had evidence to field test the new vaccine that we developed. You cannot believe it, that the Nigerian yellow fever vaccine was more effective than the one we imported from Paris and Dakar. It gave us 97.9% level of protection as compared to the one that was brought from abroad that gave us about 93%. So Nigeria had the capacity to manufacture the vaccine. Now with this new development that the virus came in and we could quickly identify it, it means that even though we didn't progress, that's another story, a story for another day, you know, on why didn't we progress along the vaccine manufacturing. But we progressed along building capacity to be able to identify the pathogens causing these diseases. So we strengthened our laboratories. We could quickly, you know, pursue these pathogens. So coming to whether Nigeria, you know, can manufacture or produce its own coronavirus or COVID-19 vaccine is very possible and very easy, very doable. And I must mention 3 things that has happened that can make it, you know, to start moving. When Nigeria was now revisiting how to upgrade our capacity to manufacture vaccines, a company called BioVaccines was established. And that vaccine company was supposed to be a public-private partnership with May and Baker. So it happened about 21 years ago, but it's having difficulty in taking off. I think the government is now addressing that issue. And these are structural issues, legal issues, and litigious issues. I think when that is handled, then we shall have something in place. Then the second point is the fact that, you know, it has never happened that Nigerian government will dedicate itself and provide huge amount of money, you know, like the 10 billion released now for the manufacture of only coronavirus. Am I right, Honorable Minister? 10 billion naira. That is, even the history of African continent, that has never happened. So that is another strong statement that, you know, we are making to the world that we want to actually start going back to manufacture our vaccines. Then the third point is the empowerment of these other research institutes. Because without research and development, you cannot produce. Except if you are going to import what they have produced in bulk, then you repackage here. So these 3 things that have been done, you know, shows that Nigeria can do it. But there's time wasting in terms of, you know, getting that process to start on the ground, to really, you know, take off the way it should. So maybe this is due to the fact that we ignore history, and if you ignore history, history ignores you. That's...
All right, Professor Nasidi, thanks a lot. Let's return to Professor Morris Iwu. Professor Morris Iwu, perhaps one of the experiences that we had, and we still have with regard to coronavirus in the past year, has been immune booster. That's to say, boost your immunity, and then, of course, you are unlikely to be infected by coronavirus, or even if you are infected, then you can overcome it. Now, this led to a wide range of proposals. I mean, you are a professor in the field of pharmacy. How well, in your opinion, was the messaging received by the populace as to personal responsibility that they could take in terms of either boosting their own immunity or just listening to expert advice and then following through without having to get hospitalized?
Thank you. One of the things that has happened with a heavy story again is the fact that Africa seems to have done better than most of other parts of the world, in the sense that our fatality rate is still very low. And some people have been debating as to why is that so. And one of the issues have been how we eat, how we live. I think the immune boosting food item that we take must have helped, but those are still anecdotal, and the research is still going on. On our own part, you will also recall that 2 weeks after we had the first index case, that I did approach the Federal Ministry of Health and Ministry of Science and Technology to inform them that we had earlier had a product that was both seen to be an antiviral and then have immune boosting property. But the interesting thing about immune boosting is that the time course of this particular virus, immune boosting is not enough, because if you have the immune system, actually one of the ways the virus attacks the patient is to exaggerate the inflammatory kinase. And then, so if you just product that just boosts the immune system alone, it will not be able to save the person. So that emphasis must have to be made between immune boosting and then the therapeutic effect after the virus has set in. Luckily for us, the product that we did bring forward is undergoing clinical trials now at Lut. But then within the period, like happens in science, the country of Thailand, based on the work that we have made public, the ingredients that we use in preparing, is just an ordinary tea, that they were able to have it licensed in their product, what we call emergency use authorization, that the compound andrographis is being used there as a formal drug. Whereas here we're also doing our clinical trials. And then the product, having gone through NAFDAC, helped to give people the kind of courage that they needed and faith to be able to use it. As I said earlier at the beginning of this presentation, one of the good things that has happened, that there was a rapid transition. There was translation medicine from the bench to the bedside. People were able to experiment because there was no known cure for the virus. So people were able to try everything that they could. And a lot of those so-called immune boosters, natural products, they work. And I think there was a governor who all he did was just to take his usual abo, and at the end of the day, he was better. And then from the study done by NCDC and the NIMA, it's obvious that a lot more Nigerians came in contact with the virus than we actually knew. If a situation were in Lagos, 1 out of every 5 had the antibodies. It not necessarily mean that they got it from this particular pandemic, but what it means that they have been exposed previously to coronavirus, which means that there must have been some resilient immune boosting that our people must have taken over the years. And what is needed now is a structured drug development plan. And I'm sure that with what is going on in various laboratories in Nigeria, that we will now be able to have the confidence to know that our system works. The product that we made, there are just 3 immune fortification products. They're in the market and they're doing very well, which means that Nigerians actually did accept what is happening. And as I said, as far away as Thailand, that they have been able to adopt andrographis as a drug of choice for the treatment of coronavirus. So the immune boosting works, but the immune boosting alone is not enough to protect us from the virus. What it does, just like the vaccines that they're using now, all it does is to strengthen your body in terms of fighting back, but it does not prevent you from getting the virus. So we are urging people to obey the fundamental that the NCDC have brought forward, namely wear face masks, wash your hands, and be able to maintain social distancing between people. If you do those 3 things, the non-pharmaceutical intervention mechanism, I think that gives you a better chance of surviving the virus. And one of the 4th thing which is not aligned to the 3 is the fact that those who are 65 years and over should not venture going to any crowded places or meetings or gatherings. You can always send messages that you are not able to because of your age. That is not a crime. And so far, it has been saving lives from our own point of view.
All right. Thank you, sir. Now, back here in Abuja, Dr. Henry, before the advent of COVID-19, the issue of the state of affairs of Nigerian hospitals, came on stream because when it broke out, it appeared that not many Nigerian hospitals were prepared, to handle COVID-19 cases. This also led to the establishment of isolation centers. Now, 1 year in the fight against coronavirus, what has been an improvement in the nation's hospitals in terms of equipment, in terms of facilities, and of course, the capacity building for the health workers?
Well, thank you. What I said earlier is that virtually all health systems in the world were caught off guard. It's not typically a Nigerian problem. As you can see, has happened even among the strongest countries in the world with the strongest health systems. They were also overwhelmed. They were surprised they didn't have enough ventilators. They did not have enough hospital beds. They had to quickly construct. Famously, China is said to have constructed a 1,000-bed hospital within a certain number of weeks. So a lot of countries had to face the challenge of inadequacy in their health systems, a response to the COVID-19 infection. And the same was true in Nigeria, in that we were faced immediately with the embarrassment of how many ventilators do we have, how many ICU beds do we have, how many isolation centers we had. And the president was very, very interested and supported the health sector with everything we wanted. We also had support from our partners, the multilaterals, the WHO, and all the other Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and so on. And then the Nigerian COVID, those are the coalition against COVID-19, that's the business sector. They supported us very, very generously. Now, we started out with 2 laboratories, and now we have over 80 public health laboratories functioning, and not hospital laboratories, but public health laboratories for diagnosis of infections of this nature. Now, at the same time, we have increased our bed capacity for isolation centers tremendously. As I speak to you, we have only about 36% occupancy, which means that we have over 60% of beds available if the situation arises. We have trained a large number of persons, a large number of competencies. We have made use of the Center of Excellence for Infectious Diseases, that is the Irua Teaching Hospital, where they have a lot of knowledge and expertise on this kind of problem. They came to do the hand-holding that helped us here in Abuja to understand and accredit the treatment centers. So we have used all the assets we have to create what we have at the moment, the state of readiness that we have. We have enough PPEs. As I leave here now, I will go to receive another set of donations that has been given to us, courtesy of the West African Health Organization and foreign partners who are still supporting us in different ways. The government has also made resources available. We are building oxygen plants all over the country, 38 of them, and where the Global Fund is also supporting us to rehabilitate the old plants we have so that we have new ones and old ones, which will take care not only of all the cases we have of COVID-19, but other cases that will require oxygen, which before now would have been in difficult situations, like the cases of asthma and the cases of pneumonia. They can now be taken care of also. So we have gained a lot in trying to rebuild the health system, and we are continuing to gain, continuing to learn also, and looking for opportunities to for every state to now have a standard isolation center and a 10-bed ICU. That project is going on, and also a molecular laboratory functional in every state, every teaching hospital. So a lot has gone on, and a lot has been achieved in this period of time, and we're still continuing to push for more achievements as we go along.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ihonere. Professor Nasidi, Good Morning Nigeria took a special interest in the occurrences in Kano when there were reports of unexplained deaths. We had grave diggers who were reporting that they were working in overdrive because of the many dead bodies they had to bury, and there were no formal autopsies. Incidentally, we also had His Highness, the Emir of Kano, join us on the conversation on Good Morning Nigeria. Well, I recall that the Presidential Task Force also took an interest in that, and you were one of the experts that were sent to Kano. And after some time, the news petered out as to the unexplained deaths. What happened in Kano, and what were the lessons, if any?
Well, thank you for that important question. That is the aspect of our response that must not be ignored, because that is a point where the virus almost took us by surprise. And, you know, when the unexplained deaths started occurring in Kano, nobody at the initial stage associated with Ebola. But
with Ebola or
with COVID, sorry, with COVID-19. But when the death rate started increasing beyond what they have seen in the last 20, 30 years, you know, since the advent of the meningitis that killed so many people in Kano, it became obvious that something strange is happening. And one thing that was very peculiar also was that, you know, even the local people, not even the health or scientists, started observing that the deaths were coming from some local areas, you know, and mostly urban. So when the cases started increasing and deaths started increasing, everybody became worried and interested, including the federal government. So to cut the long story short, the Honorable Minister formed a TAC team, to go to Kano and see how we can address the issue. So the team was headed by Dr. Sani Gwarzo, who is now the Permanent Secretary and Minister of Trade and Industry and Commerce. And he's a public health scientist. And when we arrived, we found that three things were happening. One, it's already obvious that the state government was worried and wanted to put in place mechanisms that will be used to checkmate the spread of the, not cases now, but deaths. So deaths were so frequent. Two, the community themselves, and led by the EMA, as you mentioned, was already putting in place mechanisms that could be used to sensitize the communities and let them know what they will do to actually fight the spread of the disease and the increase in deaths. Then three was the intervention by the federal government. That is, what do we need to do to checkmate what is happening? So what we did is, first and foremost, try to establish the causes of the deaths or the infection that was spreading. And by the time we arrived, one of the healthcare workers, actually from UNICEF or one of the international organizations, caught the disease. By the third or fourth day, he was dead. By the time we arrived, one university alone had lost almost 4 to 5 professors. By the time we arrived, almost 60 to 65% of the healthcare workers in one hospital that were having the frontline healthcare workers that were working with the patients or handling the dead bodies became infected, and they had typical symptoms of Ebola, of corona. And we now realize that there's one thing that we have to address immediately. Let's assume there are other causes of the death, but the immediate one that we are seeing could be that is a transmissible infection, most likely caused by a virus that was giving symptoms that were typical of corona. So we as public health officers had to sensitize the state government that, look, we believe this disease or this death is being caused by this virus that is spreading worldwide. Then we needed to immediately establish these people dying, how did they acquire the virus? So did they acquire the virus through the same route of the Italian that came from Italy or Europe to Lagos, or there are other ports of entry? So we quickly established, one, that yes, the spread of the disease that is causing the deaths, majority of the deaths, we didn't say all, could be coronavirus. Two, the transmission is high, and it's already seen that we have a relationship between those who are coming in contact with any patient that had that symptom. Then three, we want to know, which of the dead bodies or which of the deaths that have been recorded were actually directly attributable to the coronavirus. So we did both what they call oral autopsy, and then also did direct investigation of those who have died that are not even suspected to be from coronavirus. And our finding was very revealing. Our finding was that, yes, coronavirus played a key role in the cases and deaths in Kano. What extent we couldn't immediately report. Two, some of the deaths that occurred that were not even attributed initially to Ebola, that they say, oh, this is malaria, or this is meningitis, or this is just TB, etc. When we got samples of the bodies that were deposited at the mosque, we realized that almost between 45 to 60% of such cases were actually attributable to coronavirus. And now we returned, we sensitized the state government, empowered them to get the state ready for the fight. But I forgot to mention that when we arrived also, there was only one laboratory out of the 3 that was existing in Kano that was functional. The 2, one was affected by the fact that 60% of the staff got infected. The other one was just getting ready. So before we left, we reactivated the 3 laboratories. Luckily, as the Honorable Minister of Health was saying, we went with the very excellent experts from Irua Specialist Hospital. So we moved them, they went around, activated the laboratories, sensitized the community, empowered the infection and prevention control activities, and also empower the case management. So to cut a long story short, by the time we were leaving, we sensitized and empowered the state government to be able to fight and reduce the cases. Before we left, the cases and deaths went down very sharply. Secondly, we also made sure that the government of Kano was empowered by a written report that had all the plans and recommendations of what we believe they should do to prevent further occurrence. Then lastly, we came back and reported to the Honorable Minister of Health and handed over the report. Unfortunately, when we left, the government reacted and said, oh no, we are over diagnosing that those deaths were not due to Ebola or corona, and that less than 10% or 15% of the deaths were due to corona. And because of that, they were virtually rejecting our report, and that they paid dearly for it, because barely 1 or 2 weeks after that, the second wave came in. And as I'm telling you now, one of the universities lost about 7 professors. Many highly placed Nigerians from Kano have been dying from corona. And also we don't know the impact on the lower class citizens. Death rates increased. Our survey from the graveyards and all this thing, they said in the last 2 or 3 months that is going, similar death rates were occurring. So unfortunately, they ignored expert advice at their own peril.
So invariably, as at that time, the deaths that were recorded were actually caused by coronavirus?
Not all.
Not all?
No, naturally it can't be all. But we believe more than 50% or 60% of those deaths around that period were attributed to coronavirus.
All right, before we take a break, I'd like to ask Professor Morrissey to come in here. Within the period that we are reviewing, especially at the initial stage, some medical personnel, especially from your area, that's pharmacists, came up with medications which they presented to government, to different institutions as well, as to medicines that they have the potency actually to cure coronavirus. And at the end of the day, it does appear that none of these medications were selected by federal government or any authority as to be what should be administered on patients of coronavirus. Let us understand what happened along the line. And I'm sure I can recall that you also presented a particular medication as well to the federal government at that period. Let us know what happened along the line. Does it mean that none of those medications were, as they were presented, to be efficacious for the treatment of the virus, or that federal government or the authorities concerned overruled those medications?
What's happened, the drug development process is actually a very long process. But having said that, we were one of those that went to the government earlier on. It was based on the scientific data, the antiviral activity and anti-inflammatory activity of 3 sets of compounds which we had presented to the government at the time. We are not presenting it for the purposes of any support, but for the purposes of saving lives. And that one of them is what we call IHP detox tea. Frankly, as we speak, we cannot even meet with the demand because people who use them find that they work. Here in Imo State, for example, we are trying to dissuade people from medical tourism so that because the doctors say I cannot go. And then it's a situation whereby the drug development process is long. For example, the famous, or if you like, the controversial drug from Madagascar. The world and a lot of people dismiss it outright, but unfortunately, it was one of those sad things from Africa because we don't have confidence in ourselves. The Madagascar therapy actually works because it is based on artemisinin. When we then had a situation that when we were really approached by a company in the US that had looked at it and found out what did happen was that the dose of the artemisinin, the active compound in the Madagascar therapy, was not given enough. And by the time they converted the crude extract to the manufactured product, because artemisinin is an endoperoxide, very, very labile, that the compound was destroyed in that process of industrialization. So when it was a relook, he found that it was one of the most active antiviral agents most specific drug that can be utilized for treatment of COVID-19. Then do you know what finally happened? The Indians went ahead of us. We had mounted a clinical trial approved by various agencies, went to University of Abuja. Their ethical group approved it to be tested, but because of our slow process, the Indians went ahead of us. And if you look at literature, they have what they call Ativeda. Ativeda is nothing but the same old Madagascan therapy, but they have been able to get the active compound. And I actually briefed the Minister of State for Health about 3 months ago, when we actually told him that this is something we can do as a country. But it is that lack of response from our own point of view that is the issue. You cannot say that none of them work when you have not tested them. You have to, first of all, test something scientifically before. We don't have the capacity within the system to be able to test the veracity of those things, because you have to have an antiviral laboratory that can do clinical testing of those compounds. You have to have a clinical trial set up. As I did mention earlier, it's taking Lagos Lutz, the medical team that have been testing, that have been doing clinical trials on the compound we gave them for. And they have been having positive results. But how these things go, that it has to be something, a closed shop from us, because we cannot be interfering with what they are doing. They are doing their work. So it is a long process. So I believe we are one of the few that have been able to have product that went all the way to the randomized clinical trial, which is the gold standard. And I did mention these two agents just to be able to prove a point that we have to have a different take on this. It is interesting that the same country that found it very, very easy to import millions and billions of naira of the vaccine, nobody spared a kobo to be able to support any of the other researches that were based on science. As I also mentioned earlier, I don't want to take issue with anybody, but to think that about less than a month after the virus broke, that we had approached the government and said, here we have something that is worth testing. So we cannot really say that none of them work, because you don't have the laboratory capacity to be able to do in vitro testing of those compounds to start with. You don't have the laboratory capacity to do animal studies. You don't have a clinical setup to do clinical trials. Those things have to be funded, and then we are funding one that is going on. I mentioned the area of the issue of artemisinin, 500 milligram, which we have gone through all the protocol, but because of how slow we are, very, very slow, the Indians beat us to it. They mounted a 3-center studies, and they were able to approve a drug which is called Ativeda. I remember that this country has spent millions of naira on having Artemisia annual farms all over the country. And this could have been a very big project for the entire country. We approached NIPRID, we approached Ministry of Health, we approached everybody we could approach, but because there is this lack of that political will, lack of that self-confidence on ourselves, if there's any bad story in this whole COVID-19 story, it is that our lack of confidence in our own ability to be able to do what we should do. So that is the story about the COVID-19 in terms of those drugs. So you cannot really say that those drugs did not work, because you have not.
All right. Professor Morrison, thank you very much there for your views. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with our guests.
A new edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the game changer, His Excellency Governor Abdullahi Sule of Nasarawa State. Broadcasting in a digital economy, Maxwell Logo gives an insight. This edition also features Nancy Naji of AIT, a name synonymous with business. Meet the NCDC boss, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, also x-rays the relevance of social media in the modern society. Meet some TV professionals who have impacted their spaces and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Nigerian youths are about the greatest assets the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth entrepreneurship support years by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youth, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria. Pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
My culture preaches peace. My culture preaches peace. My culture preaches peace. 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 My culture preaches peace.
Even our religion
Preaches peace.
If our culture preaches peace, remember your culture. Use your voter's card. Vote peacefully
And wisely. We are one.
This message is from the National Council for Arts and Culture.
West Brom continue their fight to survive relegation when they welcome Brighton to the Hawthorns. This Saturday, it's West Bromwich Albion versus Brighton and Hove on the Premier League Live, showing on the network service of the NTA from 3:30 p.m. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Axis Bank, Babai Jebu, Lipton, and Close Up in association with Go.com.
All right, here, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on NTA's network service. Let's return to the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Osagi Hanire. Dr. Hanire, you may wish to respond to the points raised by Professor Morris with regard to how we have tended to treat, shall I say, proposals by some of our researchers and what they needed to do and what assistance they needed to also get. Earlier, when you were talking about lessons learned as well as platforms and infrastructure developed, you talked about how our hospitals have now, of course, been improved in terms of facilities and all that, but research is a very critical aspect of this. NIPRID is also there, and Professor Iwu, you have other private researchers. Going forward, what in your opinion is required to be done so that we can have in-country capacity for improved qualitative research?
Yes, this is a question that has been of great interest, and at every briefing, I have always said that we are also looking inwards. We are looking at R&D, research and development in our own country. We are paying good attention to what our scientists are doing. When these drugs from Madagascar came in, were sent into Nigeria, we immediately distributed them to our research centers, to NIPRID, and to NIMA, and to NAFDAC. The result that came out is that it is artemisinin, which is a component of the malaria drug, and that it was grown in Nigeria. So this drug is actually not new. It's here, present in our country, being grown here. And because the component of malaria, the effectiveness against COVID-19, which at that time was not known, was not really demonstrated. That was the result we got. Now, scientists, of course, quarrel a lot with each other until they arrive at something. And the conclusion from all of our research centers is that, yes, well, it's useful against that, but how useful it is against COVID-19 is not well established. Remember, there was also a lot of passion for chloroquine at the time. Then it shifted to hydroxychloroquine. Then it shifted to remdesivir. Now it's on ivermectin. So we're constantly falling into the situation where there are different possibilities being brought forward. And that artemisinin was one of the possibilities brought forward, but it was not really established. And I believe that there are many scientific communities in and outside the country that will have snatched it up. Now we are told that India snatched it up. Very good. Okay, I'm not quite familiar with what the Indians do with it, but I know that the Casualties in India were not dramatically reduced from the reports we got. They had very, very high fatalities from this medicine. This is not to say that it was not effective, but quite clearly we didn't see the dramatic impact that it had. We're also following up, we're still following up on all pharmaceuticals. There is no herbal preparation that we get, and we get dozens of them, that we do not refer to NIPRI, that's a Pharmaceutical Research Institute. The research plants and anything that has to do with that area of science. And to NIMA in Lagos, we share that with them, and to NAFDAC. So it is from them that we get all the information, and we encourage them to try as much as possible. With regard to vaccines, we actually have 2 vaccine candidates, one from African Center for Excellence and Genomics, and one from Ahmadu Bello University, which need to be put through clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Now, that particular process is expensive and will cost over $1.5 million, for which we are looking for sponsors. Now, this is a vaccine that will be very interesting, but even if we had the money, it will take up to a year or more to actually finish getting the results. And we are still, as I speak, looking for sponsors. We are talking to those who could provide the money. Meanwhile, we're looking for money for vaccines that are ready for now, while we continue to look for vaccines that we can make domestically. We have the potential. We have all the wherewithal. We have the scientists. They're very smart people, both on the side of pharmacists and medical people, and the scientific, those who are in the science area. So the search continues, not only here, but across the whole world, for medicines that are therapeutics that are useful.
While we are still on the issue of vaccines, tell us, when should Nigeria expect the first tranche of vaccines to come? And what will be the vaccination protocol? We understand Ghana has already received, South Africa has already received. So when now do we expect? The month ends on Sunday, and so we're entering March. So when do we expect the vaccines? And when they arrive, what will be the protocols?
When the vaccines will arrive depends actually on the donors. These vaccines are donated, and they are provided by the COVAX facility, as you know. And this COVAX facility is in the process of giving them out to various countries. We understand that after Ghana is Ivory Coast. When ours will come exactly, we do not know. So it is not really in our hand. But Ghana got its first shipment of 600,000 doses. We're expecting 4 million, which is quite a size, and we are prepared to receive that vaccine as soon as it comes. All the preparations are down. The launch of the vaccine will be at National Hospital, Abuja. They have been put on notice, and NPACD has done all the planning and micro-planning needed to get that process going. Now, as for the protocol, we are following the recommendation of the World Health Organization, which is to give attention to frontline health workers. And we are going to do the same thing, those who are exposed to the risk of being infected, and those who, if they got infected, create a vacuum in workforce. So we need to protect them. They are very valuable people, and it includes those who are working in our laboratories dealing with this virus, diagnosing them. The second category will be those who, if they got infected, will be seriously sick, will be severely sick. And those are the elderly, those are those with vulnerable diseases, with diabetes, with hypertension, and cardiovascular disease, asthma. So those ones we're giving priority. You see, so we are going to start working healthcare workers and then the elderly and those with vulnerabilities, and scaling down to the age of 18. We are looking for what we call herd immunity, to be able to immunize 70% of our people, of our citizens, and hope that with that and with the same process in our neighboring countries, the West African sub-region, we are all safe. So our target is 70%.
The vaccination is taken twice. Right. At what intervals? 1 week after or 2 weeks after the first dosage?
Well, the AstraZeneca is a 2-dose vaccine. The Johnson & Johnson, which is among the ones we are getting from the African Union, is a 1-dose vaccine. So there are 2 different types. And the interval that is suggested with the AstraZeneca is 3 weeks. But some countries have demonstrated the experience that if you stretch that interval up to 12 weeks, you do get better response, a stronger immune response and longer lasting immune response. That's what has been recommended, particularly from the UK. So we are looking at what the UK experience brings and also what we see here, but it's from 3 weeks to 12 weeks.
Okay, Honorable Minister, thank you very much. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Here is some breaking news. Bandits are reported to have kidnapped an unspecified number of students of Government Girls Secondary School Jangebe in Talata Mafara local government area of Zamfara State. Details of this developing story will be brought to you as the day goes by. Once again, we're reporting that bandits have kidnapped an unspecified number of students of Government Girls Secondary School Jangebe in Talata Mafara local government area of Zamfara State. Details later. All right, so you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria. Let's bring in Professor Nasidi on the issue of vaccination. Just one point to clarify, because we keep hearing of, shall we say, the initial jab and then the so-called booster jab in some cases. The Honorable Minister already said, look, some of the vaccines are just a single shot and then you are good to go. Well, knowing our environment, elsewhere we have seen instances of so-called vaccine chasers. You're going to see where vaccine is available and then you quickly get one. So if you get, let's say the vaccine that comes now, AstraZeneca, you get one here, and then you are on the queue to get another one, you don't immediately see it, another vaccine is available, maybe Moderna. Can you take 2 different vaccines from 2 different producers to fortify yourself, or there are potentially consequences?
Well, that's a very difficult question that many, scientists all over the world are asking. But the key is, which is the first? The wild virus that is circulating. Some of the people we are immunizing must have even come in contact with that virus. So they will have a particular level of antibody protection. So when you now give them the vaccine virus, it will serve as a booster. So scientifically, it will be possible that you get one type of vaccine, and then if, your time comes to receive another, you can get from another manufacturer. But most countries are avoiding that. And this is why Britain immediately Britain commenced their mass campaign using the Pfizer vaccine. They were faced with this big problem of, how many people can we quickly reach with the number of vaccines that we have, and then wait for another 2 weeks to immunize others, while leaving large volume of British citizens unimmunized, especially the ones at risk. So what they did was to say, hey, listen, we understand the protocol of the company that has manufactured the vaccine that says you vaccinate now, and then after 2 weeks, you give the second dose. But their scientists came together and said, no, we can modify it. At least we have bought the vaccine. We know what is happening in our population. Let's see if we can modify it. And to be frank, it worked. So if you take Pfizer vaccine now, and you have to get it in the 2 weeks' time, and the vaccine is not available, Britain said you can, widen that gap, to about 12 weeks until when this. But if you do that, like Nigeria is going to get 4 million doses now. If Nigeria gets 4 million doses, as Kiran asked, oh yeah, but you need to quickly immunize and give the second dose. So if you are doing that, that means the 4 million doses will go only for 2 million Nigerians. But Nigeria has 205 million population, out of which almost 160 million will require this vaccine. So if that is the case, you are just covering 2 million out of 160 million. But if you do the British way, you can use the 4 million doses to actually immunize 4 million people. And then, wait and give longer gap, maybe up to 12 weeks before you get another batch of the AstraZeneca, and then you continue. Then secondly, you ask the question is, how come, this disease did not devastate the African continent as was expected? So we are thinking that, it's very possible that a coronavirus, not necessarily this COVID-19, but with similar properties, must have infected our people in the continent. And so we have like underlying protection, which was hidden. So when the virus came with all the predictions of the modern scientists and others, that dead bodies will be lying in Africa, it didn't happen. So that means there must be a hidden underlying, protection level among the people that, we need to determine. So the survey that was carried out in Lagos, Gombe, and I think, is it Oyo State or something, has shown and confirmed this fear that yes, we must have been exposed to this virus. You take Lagos, almost 1/5. If the population of Lagos is 16 million, and about 1/4 rather is, having the antibody to coronavirus, which means about 4 million Lagosians have already been exposed to the virus without us knowing. So we are grossly underreporting. But God has a way of protecting his own, that those who are exposed to this virus already have underlying protection. So what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, Africa might not need the 2-dose vaccine. That is what could be, that we might need just 1-dose vaccine because the level of our exposure to the virus is high. Then the last point is, when the virus is already circulating, we had a problem of, we couldn't control mass gathering. We even facilitated it. Take, for instance, the NIN, national identification, this and so on and so forth. SIM linkage. All this is brought too many people together, and I'm sure there could have been exchange of these viruses and so on and so forth. So there could have been increased natural exposure that will now, provide what the Honorable Minister mentioned, a hidden herd immunity, which we didn't know before. And as a result, the poor people, are not really dying as expected, and people couldn't explain. But we have a standing committee, advisory committee of the Honorable Minister, led by Professor Tomori, and made of top scientists in the country. We are looking into how, why is this happening? Is it possible that this will happen? Then that committee will also study and work with the MPSCD and NAFDA to see if we might need only just 1 dose.
Yeah, but Kieran, that's an interesting point.
Exactly.
But we have seen, arising from these presumptions that Professor Dansidi has talked about and the scientists are working towards this, the behavior of some outliers in the federation, let's say some subnational governments, where they have carried on as if corona doesn't exist, and they have mass gatherings, no social distancing, no mask, and so on and so forth. How much of a challenge, Honorable Minister, very quickly, did your committee, that's to say the Presidential Task Force, and indeed the Federal Ministry of Health, how much of a challenge did you find with just getting some states to cooperate with you in the fight against coronavirus in the past year?
Yeah, that has been a problem in that the health sector in Nigeria operates actually along tiers, federal, state, and local government. The federal government needs to have the cooperation of states, of the governors, and by extension the commissioners, to implement many of the programs and activities that need to be carried out because of the division of labor in there. So what we are worried about most now is the process of vaccination, because there's a role that state governments and state authorities have to play, which requires also some counterpart funding, which we are hoping that they will be able to bring up so that we do not have delays when it comes to actually vaccinating. That's our greatest concern right now. But with the area of compliance with public health recommendations and protocol, we have had that issue of trying to get states to work with us to understand the science, to follow the science, which says clearly that the more you protect yourself, one protects the other, the safer all of us are.
All right,
some compliance is there, some compliance is also not found.
All right, gentlemen, it's been a very interesting discussion this morning, and 1 year into the fight against the COVID-19. We'd like to thank all of you for being here. Professor Nasidi, we would like to thank you for being part of the program this morning. And of course, the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Osage Hanire, we also appreciate your time and shared experience. Professor Maurice Iwu from IMO, we also want to appreciate you for being part of the program this morning. Thank you all for coming.
All right. We also have to appreciate viewers who've sent in their tweets. Some of the issues you raised in your tweets were explained by our guest this morning, plus more. Dele Jack Solomon, Festus Akimboyewa, Brown Harry, Mike Ayakwo, Leo Fadaka, Panabas Dynamic, Suleiman Babagana, Law Alpha C, Aji Mohammed, and Ibe Peter, Emeka Ede. Thanks a lot for your tweets. So that does it for us on Good Morning Nigeria for today and indeed for the week. We're back on Monday, same time, 7 in the morning. Until then, while having you observe the social protocols, have a lovely weekend. I'm Kingsley Osado.
And I'm Kyrian. You might have a good weekend.